This and every episode of the AVB Podcast is brought to you by our incredible sponsors. Make sure you find links for them, today's guest, and of course all our other social media down in the description below. You can comment, ask questions that you think we might have missed, and of course don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell to make sure you're getting notifications of all our episodes. Alright, let's get to it. This week's guest, Renaldo Agostino, along with his brother Remo, have been staples in the Windsor entertainment industry for well over 20 years. With connections to some of the area's largest nightclubs, adult venues, and festivals, the Agostino brothers have brought their Toronto roots and helped grow Windsor since they found it in their university days. Renaldo has incredible business knowledge, especially about here in Windsor, and he shares some of the more entertaining stories about his wild ride. Alright folks, let's get to it. Renaldo Agostino. How's it going? Welcome to this episode of the AVB Podcast. Mr. Renaldo Agostino, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Excellent. So I guess the way we can start this is we'll introduce you to my audience as what, like entrepreneur? Is that a good enough title?
I guess.
Yeah? Okay, so for my audience, let's go right back to the very beginning. You and your brother grew up in Toronto, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about family life in Toronto.
You know what? I grew up, my mom was an angel. I grew up with my brother and my sister in downtown Toronto, where our family still resides. We grew up just like every other kid in the area. Our parents were from Italy.
First generation?
First generation, yeah. And almost everyone in my neighborhood was like that.
Right.
Everybody was new, a firstborn Canadian child.
Right.
We were the next step, and all of our parents came from either Italy or Portugal, where everybody came from in our area, and we all, grew up down the street at a Boys and Girls Club.
Talk to me about that experience, because I know when we had sat down before and talked about this, the Boys and Girls Club experience for you was really, really instrumental, right?
Absolutely, and it was not just for me, everybody in the neighborhood. Like, it was the hub. This was the place that, you spend more time at the club than you spend at home. Mm-hmm. You'd go to school, then you come home from school, have a bite to eat, go to the club, play sports until 5:45, I think it was. Go home, have dinner till 6:30, go back to the club until 9:10.
Really?
And then you go home, go to bed, and start it all again the next day.
So what was, were there organized activities, or was it just kind of like random stuff?
Well, the Boys and Girls Clubs are, huge in America, and there's quite a few in Canada too. And basically there's a gym, there's a library, there's a swimming pool, there's a games room, there's a woodwork, there's an arts and crafts room, and it was $5 a year. Mm-hmm. You paid $5 a year, your parents paid $5 a year for you and me, my brother and my sister to go to.
Right.
And basically it was where we spent all our time. We didn't know that it wasn't normal to us. That's where everybody in the neighborhood was.
Right.
And you did whatever you had to do to make sure you didn't get kicked out of the club.
Right.
Because if you got kicked out of the club, this is pre-Nintendo, there was maybe 6 channels on TV. Right. If you didn't have the club, you had nothing in our neighborhood, because that's where everybody was.
Right. And so, you were like right downtown Toronto.
Yeah,
days, right?
Dovercourt and Blue area, right down Toronto. That's
Was it a rough neighborhood growing up?
Yes and no. Right. Yes and no. We had, it was less populated than it is now, that's for sure. A lot of the parks that existed back then and a lot of the green space is now condominiums and stuff. But there was a lot of, we were close to Lansdowne, which back then was a really bad part of town. And, the Bathurst area wasn't what it used to be. Even High Park isn't what it is now. High Park now is like this prestigious area to live in, where when I was a kid, it was like, we would, me and my buddy Joe and my brother and everybody else would jump on our bikes, and we wouldn't tell our parents that we were going to High Park, because nobody goes to High Park. Don't go to High Park, but that's where all the cool trails were. That's where all the big hills were. So that's where we wanted to be on our bikes.
Did you have a hard time staying out of trouble?
No, for the most part, we stayed out of trouble.
Yeah.
There was some trouble in our neighborhood. Like, I'll never forget a night where, everybody would, on weekends when the club was closed, we'd all hang out at the park.
Right.
Which was right where the club was situated. So it was really like the hub of where everything happened. And growing up, we saw people doing drugs. We saw all this stuff, just like any other kid sees. Like, I'm sure my kid's gonna see it, or they probably already do. Like, it's not foreign. You're gonna see it, and we were exposed to it. And it was one night where a guy showed up with a propane tank and a lighter, and he was gonna explode all of us if we didn't give him money, and just all kinds of things. We saw it all. In our neighborhood, we saw it all. So, it certainly was an interesting place to grow up. But, thank God we all had the club to really, to teach us athletics, to education, to everything.
When we had this conversation before about your childhood, you talked about the club a lot, but we never really talked about school. Was school like an important thing to you, or was it just kind of a thing you had to get through?
Thing you had to get through.
Yeah? Mom sort of like forced you all the way through, or was...
No, my sister was really, really smart, so we always wanted to try and, somewhat keep up with her when it came to education. But school for me was just, I'm told I need a diploma, let's go get a diploma.
Really?
I'm told I need to graduate with this mark, okay, well, I'll try and graduate with this mark. I certainly regret it, and I certainly wish I would have put more effort into my education, because I now, at an older age, realize how much learning I missed.
Right.
That I could have learned more. Now that I'm a sponge for information, because I want to know as much as I can, I kind of feel bad that I didn't take advantage of the opportunity when I had people trying to teach me, and now I'm kind of trying to teach myself.
Right.
And I'll never forget my grade 8 teacher, when after my graduation, I think it was after my high school graduation, we went back to elementary school, just like every kid does, just like my kids do.
Yeah.
We went back to our elementary school, and my grade 8 teacher told me, listen, if you're not ready for university, don't go. Wait till you're ready to go, and wait till you're ready to learn. Don't do it just because you feel you have to do it or you're told you have to do it. When you do it, be ready to do it, want to do it, so you can ingest all this information and really excel at it. And I didn't listen. I went to university right after my last year of high school, and here I am.
So when you went to university, university is what brought you to Windsor?
Yes.
Now, I definitely am interested in your journey through that, but overall, do you find, because I know this is a little tough of a question for you because you work closely with the university now, but do you look back on your time in university as wasted as far as the schooling goes?
No, because not only was I lucky enough to, when I was in university, when I was going to school, it brought me other opportunities. I was the marketing guy at CJAM for years. I had my own office in the basement. I was a TA for Dr. Lewis. So there's all these other things that education was able to bring me that I was able to learn from. And my classes, which were really interesting, because up to high school, you learn, like, you're just trying to kind of like go through the motions, where in university, you're kind of pushed to think and to think differently. And your opinion matters, and it's not, as simple as, well, this is made out of this, and that's made out of that, and this goes here and that goes there. In university, you're really given the opportunity to express yourself and really think for yourself. And no one's going to tell you you're right or wrong.
Right.
It's what you feel, and that's the biggest thing that university did for me. And I went to college for a year after I was done my education at the University of Windsor. I went to St. Clair for a year to take the advertising program, which was great, but it was the total opposite.
Right.
It was this goes here, this goes there, this does this does that, where university was nothing like that. So, no, I certainly don't regret it. I think it was great.
What was important to you through that time?
Graduating.
Really? That was your main focus?
Yeah, finishing, graduating, because after my first year, so many of my friends, so many of the people that I came to school with were gone.
Really?
They didn't make the cut. It was almost like you felt that you were, you were special because you made it through year one, where I think maybe 75% of the people that I was friends with in year one didn't make it to year two.
Right.
So I was like, wow, that's...
Because you took communications, right?
Yes.
And communications specifically, and I mean, I apologize if this comes off disparaging to anybody, but communications to me has always been like a catch-all. Right? Like, that's kind of where everybody who thinks they have to go to university but doesn't really know what they want to do ends up going, like, oh, okay, I guess we'll do communications and learn that. Did you latch, well, obviously, like, that's why so many of your classmates, I think, don't end up making the second year, but did you find, was there something in the communications program itself that became important to you, or was it just literally finish whatever is?
No, I had some great professors that, still to this day, I think of all the time. Dr. Lewis, Nick Shields, who's got his own thing going on here in Windsor, was, I think maybe I might have been one of his first students
Oh, really?
And in one of his first classes when I was going to university, and he was fascinating to learn from. Because he was young, he was hip, and I could tell he knew things about media that other people didn't know. There was like, it was such a weird time because the internet was brand new.
Right. What year are we talking here?
We're talking 1997, 96.
Okay. Yeah.
96, 97 to 2000. I was graduating in the class of 2000. So I was fascinated by the internet, by video production, by all these new emerging types of media. And graphic design was another one. I was in the first graphic design class ever at the University of Windsor. Really, really, really new mediums that were entering the scene. I was there for the beginning of them at the university, and Nick was this guy who kind of had his finger on the pulse of it all. And when he'd go to all these different classes, and some classes had 400 kids, 100 would show up. Some classes had 900 kids, 300 would show up.
Right.
When you went to Shields' class, everybody always showed up.
Really?
Because you wanted to hear what this guy had to say. You knew that he was on the cutting edge of what was coming. And you look at him now and see what he's been able to accomplish with his company. And obviously, I don't even think he's teaching anymore. But he was one of those guys that I'll always remember when I was in school. That the light went off. You wanted to be at that class because you knew that you were learning something, not looking at how to deal with typewriters and cassette tapes and all this other stuff. That was this old media. We were learning about these new types of media that were coming.
Right.
So it was really, I really enjoyed some of it, and some of it I absolutely hated.
Before you came to Windsor, were nightclubs and stuff part of your life at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I was, growing up in my neighborhood, there was a group of guys that lived a couple streets over on Delaware that had this like DJ company. And when we were in grade school, they would do these dances at our school at St. Anthony's. And, at the Boys and Girls Club, we'd have dances. And, my brother and I were always into the music scene, always into music. Music was our thing. Right. Ever since we were little kids, music was our thing. And, the same thing with my kids now. Music is the thing, music is the thing. And we were always into it. So we'd watch these guys doing these things. And we'd say, boy, we'd love to do that one day. We'd love to have a shot at doing that one day. So, as we got older and we started working, we went to go work at Canada's Wonderland. And we met a guy named Mark Costanzo and George Cleopa. Mark was really big into music. He was in a ska band called Len, who, years later had one of the, if not the biggest one-hit wonder in the world called Steal My Sunshine. Yep. Right? So we grew up together. We were for years, we were all together. And we started up this DJ crew called NYFB, which stood for None of Your Fucking Business. I didn't come up with the name, Mark did. So we kind of put together this DJ crew. We got some turntables. We started getting records, and we started hanging out on Yonge Street where Play to Record and Tracks and all these record stores were. And we started really getting into the music thing and started DJing. And there was this radio station called 88.1, Dave's Dance Music it was. And we used to listen to it every Sunday. It was on Sunday afternoons. And it was like the new music of Toronto. It was like, hip hop, underground house music, stuff like Two Live Crew, like all this really good new music that wasn't being played on Much Music or Toronto Rocks or CFNY. It was this kind of underground scene that was just starting to boil. And this was the radio station you listened to. I believe it was a college station. And the guy turned out to be a banker in downtown Toronto. I think he worked at TD Bank because he had this newsletter called Dave's Dance Music, and he always used to promote it on his radio show. And he used to say, advertise in the newsletter, get to know this, get to know that. So, I think it was one day Mark or George said to me, Remo, let's get an ad in there. Let's get on that Dave's Dance Music newsletter, and we'll see if we can get some weddings or get some shows, get some gig bookings. So, we put an ad in, and I don't even remember how the hell we came up with the money. I think it came from Mark, because none of us had any money. And we started promoting ourselves as NYFB, and we started doing little gigs. Mark was at the University of Toronto at the time, so he would get us gigs in the pub at the U of T. So we'd show up at, this little dingy underground university pub, University of Toronto. We were 16, 17 years old, and we were DJing for these college students that were like eating up the Beastie Boys and all this other stuff.
Not intimidated at all?
No, not intimidated. We were there for the party. You know? So we started getting it into that way, and then, Mark would get us different gigs at different places. Like I remember we did the Dance Cave at Lee's Palace once. We do all these cool little gigs. Then we got a call one day to do a wedding at Casa Loma. So we're like, okay, guys, we made it. Here's our big gig, and show up to Casa Loma, with our crates full of underground dance music at the time. And so we, start setting up and, we're looking around and, we're not dressed horribly, but we're certainly not wearing shirts and ties, which none of us owned.
Right.
Place is beautiful. Castellon was a beautiful place. And, the bride and groom walk in with their reception party and, all of a sudden we start playing what we think we know they want to hear. And turns out we're horribly wrong. And we kind of get kicked out of the venue, and it's, they wanted Prince, they wanted Michael Jackson, and we wanted to play Beastie Boys, De La Soul, Two Live Crew, and it didn't work out. It really didn't work out. So after that, we kind of like...
Did they keep you on the whole time, or did they throw you out?
No, we were done.
Yeah.
We were done. We lasted maybe half hour, and then we were done. Bride was crying. We were like, this didn't work out too well, so we went back to doing more of the underground stuff, back to the pubs at the University of Toronto, and
decided weddings were your thing?
Decided weddings were not our thing, and to this day, I don't think I've ever been part of doing entertainment for any weddings, except the one for Jerry Millen.
Right.
Another good friend of mine. Great story about that guy too. But yeah.
So when you get here in Windsor, what's your first introduction to like Windsor's music scene?
Our first introduction to Windsor's music scene, we got here in Windsor. I think Remo and I showed up with. There's no way we had more than $5, $10 in our pocket. This was prior to OSAP being handed out. Before you got to school, you had to come down to Windsor. You had to wait a couple of days, then you got your OSAP, and then you were rich for a couple of weeks, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's how we got here. We came down here with nothing, and all of a sudden needed some work, got our OSAP, ran out of it really fast, and decided that we were going to try and find, a place to work. And we always used to walk along Wyandotte Street, and we walked along Wyandotte and ran into this place called the Windsor Music Cafe. And we went in there looking for a job, and we got it. Right away, Mr. Lee, who was a certified ninja. Like there's people that say they're, black belts, white belts, all these different. This guy you walk in his office and he said, I'm a ninja. And he's got these swords hanging over his desk, and you're like, whatever, this guy's 5'1". There's no way this guy's a ninja. Until you see somebody start a fight in the club. I'll never forget with him, we used to have, these monstrous doormen, and when we started working there, all these guys looking at us and who the hell are these guys? We just wanted jobs. We weren't there to hurt anybody or do anything of the sort.
Right.
We just needed money. So he liked us because I assume he thought we were young guys from the university and we'd be able to bring a crowd, and so he gave us the 2 jobs that he thought we were the easy ones he had to fill, the easiest ones, and we've got all these huge.
What did you get hired at? Because you didn't get hired as a bouncer.
Yeah, no, we got hired as security originally.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
We got hired as security guards originally, so we're going in there with a team of guys that are like legit security guys, and they're looking at us like, what are you guys doing here? So for the first couple of weeks, they wouldn't talk to us. We were like these outcasts. We were like the guys that came in to bring in customers or kids from the university, but we weren't going to be able to handle our own when shit went down, because back in those days, shit went down. But it turns out weeks later, we all started becoming really, really, really good friends. And, a lot of us to this day are really, really good friends. So as our popularity continued to rise at the club, we moved out of the security positions into the DJ booth.
What was that move like for you? Like, what was it that you were doing that made that move happen?
Just personality-wise.
Yeah.
We were real big personalities, and it was a time that music was changing. Mm-hmm. There was this shift towards more of the underground in club scenes. Electronic music was just starting to come in. Hip hop was really starting to make its way. Like, I remember when we were at the Music Cafe, 89X was the big thing inside of a dance club. Like, it was really a time of transition where, there was, the clubs were used to playing the soft cells of the world and the brown-eyed girls of the world, but people's musical tastes were changing. They wanted what we brought to the table, what we were into, not what the guys who were already there were into.
Why do you think you recognized that when other people didn't?
We were young.
Yeah? It's just timing?
Yeah, it's just timing. We were young.
Okay, to kind of like really to skip way ahead, but you're still kind of on the pulse of what's happening with kids these days. And it has nothing, and no offense, but you're not that young anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm. It's my passion for music. It's my passion for entertainment. I'm a media guy. I love surfing the internet. I love my phones. I love music. I love watching what my kids are into. Like I like to see what the kids are into. And now I know I'm at the point where my personal tastes are not what the mainstream's tastes are anymore. Where for a long time, my personal tastes really mirrored the mainstream, but that's now continued to change. But I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have to change with it. That from a business perspective, it can't be what I want, it has to be what the people want. I can surely enjoy what I like.
Was that a difficult lesson to learn?
I'm still learning it.
Yeah.
I think you continue to learn it. I don't think it's a difficult thing to acknowledge. I think it's a tough pill to swallow when what you like aren't what other people like, especially when there's so many different mitigating factors in a city like Windsor. You know, Windsor's influenced so strongly by Detroit.
Yeah.
You know, what kids like in Windsor are not necessarily what kids like in Toronto.
Right.
You know, like coming from Toronto, we were kind of influenced by the Toronto music scene where, you know, for example, your Maestro Fresh West was the guy in Toronto. You know, he was the Canadian rapper, where when you got to Windsor, it was booty music down here. You know, people like the ghetto tech stuff, the Detroit stuff.
Right.
You know, growing up in Toronto, I never heard booty music in my life.
Okay.
Where until you came to Windsor, then you heard of, you know, guys like DJ Godfather and all this, the deep Detroit tech house and techno and all these other things that you weren't exposed to in Toronto. So it was really, really cool to be able to, you know, see that things are different musically in different areas, even 5 hours away.
Right.
You know, within a 5-hour drive, the musical tastes in Toronto compared to Windsor, Detroit are so different.
How tough is it to keep a finger on that pulse?
If you're a fan of it, not really. If you're a fan of music, it's not really hard to keep your finger on that pulse.
Right. But like, do you? Because let's sort of just fast forward. Coming up through the clubs, you and your brother ended up buying Boom Boom Room. Boom Boom Room, right?
Yep.
That was
Opening it.
Yep. That's right. And but was that that was the first club that you guys ran as your club, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And well, I mean, you've got an amazing story about Doug Flutie that I definitely want to get to, but you've brought me to a point now where there's this question that sort of has been sitting in the back of my mind that I think you have a place that can answer this. Being part of the biggest festivals that happen here in the city, you're one of the few people who can speak at an expert level about what it takes, specifically here in Windsor, because of our location so close to Detroit, so close relatively to Toronto. I know one of the problems that the festival organizers here in Windsor have is that as soon as you offer a deal to a bigger name, you know, mover or shaker, the first thing that happens from their management team is they ping it off of Detroit and Toronto. So you're constantly caught in that trap. What is it do you think that needs to be done here in Windsor to sort of like overcome that?
You got to build the relationships. You know, I remember when we first started booking these names, you know, we had friends of ours that, you know, we're actually really good friends with Richie Houghton, and they always used to tell us, say, listen, take care of the artists, man. Take them out for a nice dinner. Give them what they want. Be super friendly. You know, make sure that everything they want, all their needs are taken care of. Build the relationships with the artists and the agents, and then you'll be able to get them. Because a lot of it, you'd be surprised, is relationships. You know, building those relationships, and that takes years to build. But when I look at, you know, the festival we're having this year, the Coming Home Music Festival, you know, when I look at the two artists we've booked, Loud Luxury, we got from one of the first agents we've ever worked with, which is Spin Inc., David Brady. And here's like this, when I met him, he was this 40-year-old Irish guy who shows up in Windsor, probably never been here before in his life, probably never been here since.
Right.
But comes to Windsor, and we had a hell of a good time.
Right.
And since then, we've gotten Avicii and Armin van Buuren and Benny Benassi and Loud Luxury and all these mega names from this guy, who, again, almost started in the same way that, you know, we started. He started in Toronto as Spin Inc. and started dealing with names and, you know, built up the relationship where everybody loves David Brady. You know what I mean? Everybody loves him. You hate working with him sometimes because he'll take you to the cleaners, but everybody loves him, right? And you always make money when you're working with David. And the other one, you know, you look at Fetty Wap. People were like, how did you guys get Fetty Wap? How do you get Fetty Wap? Well, we started working with this lady, Valerie, and she's based out in Western Canada years ago, and we were booking like ICP and all these really underground, cool hip-hop acts off her. And as the years go by, she continues to build up her talent roster. And every 6 or 7 months, she'll make a phone call and say, hey, what are you guys doing out there?
Right.
What do you guys got going on out there? Are you guys looking for acts? And, you know, this year with Coming Home Music Festival, one of our mandates was to bring in a hip-hop artist. You know, it's something that we've always wanted to do to kind of, because we identify that the market is changing and that's something that people want. So really, it's not what we like or what we see. The easiest way to keep your finger on the pulse is to be able to identify what the people want.
Right.
Once you identify what they like and what they want,
right,
it's easy. Right. So you're just keeping your eye on the audience, keeping your eye on the crowds. You know, it's the best.
So do you consider this place research?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. I consider every club research.
Yeah.
I consider downtown Windsor research. I consider downtown Detroit. I consider music festivals. Everything's research. You see me at a party, if I'm sitting there not having a good time, I'm doing my job. Because I'm paying attention to what these people want, what the crowd is into.
Right.
And that's how you know. You know, that's how you know. You don't have to, it's not rocket science. Let the audience tell you.
Who taught you this shit?
I just really liked watching live entertainment when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I come from a background where when I was a kid, I would sit there with my mom and my brother and my sister, and we would watch pro wrestling on a black and white television screen. And you learn so much from watching, you know, this fake kind of art. And, you know, you watch hockey games, you watch sporting events, you see all this stuff, you go to all these shows, you go to all these concerts, and you learn from that. You know, working with Mark and George and Remo when we were kids, going to these concerts. And, you know, I'll never forget, we used to go to like El Macombo and, you know, all these different shows in downtown Toronto with Mark. And, you know, at the time him and his sister were this highly sought after musical act that we would sit there and Mark would go there and we'd sit there and we'd have nachos. And this is at the time when record executives would show up to band shows and try and sign them. And Mark, you know, was just such a cool dude that he'd sit there and these executives would come up and tell him to come sit beside me, watch this. So we'd be sitting there and these record executives would show up with these contracts for hundreds of thousands of dollars saying, sign it, man, come on, let's go, sign it, be part of the team. And he'd look at these people and he'd tell them to go fuck themselves. Like right there at these shows, no, I'm not gonna be part, I don't wanna be this. And you know, you're like, wow, that's incredible. This guy's saying no to this much money just because he wants to stay cool. And, you know, and it was being able to be at a lot of shows, really.
Yeah.
Lets you watching people. And from when we started watching people. You know, so once you watch people, you really just continue to watch them and see what they enjoy and you give the crowd what they want.
Remo, your brother, younger or older?
Older, 24 minutes.
Okay. So, did he hold your hand through this at all?
No, I think we just all did it together.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. It was always just it wasn't like you were following him.
No, we certainly had mentors. Like,
yeah.
You know, Mr. Lee at Music Cafe was a mentor. ZZ, James, Spiro, all these guys. You know, ZZ and Spiro had Limelight in Toronto, which was like one of the greatest clubs in the Canadian history.
Right.
And when they came out down here to do Wired and Blast, and just being around them and, you know, seeing the way that they thought and then mixing it in the way we thought and putting it together really turned out to be a hit for us.
Yeah. The experience at Wired, what was that like for you?
Crazy.
Yeah.
It was crazy. You know, Wired was
Tell people what Wired was in case they don't have.
Well, Wired was the biggest nightclub that was ever in Windsor. You know, it was, I think the capacity was somewhere around 2,500 people, you know, and when Wired opened, it was the heyday of downtown Windsor, when the streets were crazy and people were everywhere. It was really the place to be. It was like this hidden secret of North America, of this party place. It was like, you know, almost like Americans coming here would be like going to Mexico for the weekend or going to Hawaii, or, you know, it was this getaway that these kids would go down to, and on a weekend there would be thousands of people on the streets, and all the bars would be busy, and if you weren't at a bar by 8 o'clock, you weren't getting in, and last call was at 1, so after you were done in downtown Windsor, you'd go to Detroit because they were open till 2, and Windsor was like party central for the longest time, and in a lot of ways it still is, don't get me wrong, but it's not as heavy as it used to be, because back in the day it was the only thing. There was no downtown Detroit. There was no Walkerville. There was downtown Windsor, that was it. And Pontiac, those were the only two closest places you could go to.
Tell me so for example, I'll sit in front of the old Boom Boom Room, which is right next door here. I'll play my guitar on the street and I'll watch the crowds move around. And I've spent time on Olette Avenue watching the crowds just like you did, a little different capacity, for lots and lots of years. Right now, like I remember a time when nightclubs in the city were a dime a dozen. They were every 3 feet. And right now, there's this one and
well, there's this one. There's there's 29 Park. There's the casino.
Yeah, you know what? And I don't really even consider and I realize Arius is, but I don't think of them that way. And yeah, 29 Park, you're absolutely right. But really, like this is the only one I see people like gathering at in front of anymore. And I wonder, from an ownership perspective, who's been around it, like in all the varying sort of like levels, how much different is it now, and how much, like, what is different about it today than it was before, and what do you like? How is it that you're able to sort of continue on with the nightclub scene as the rest of them sort of like fall apart? You know what I'm saying?
I think that, we don't look at ourselves like a nightclub, first of all. We look at ourselves as an entertainment center.
Okay.
So we're always trying to do different things, whether it's concerts. We're going to start doing live boxing in here once a month. We've got all these different things that you try and focus on that we'll continue to bring people in. Plus, we realize that our biggest market is the students, so we really focus on the students.
Right. From
our music to what we do in here to our promotions, we're really student-based. And I don't think that it's a club thing that's dying necessarily. I think it's a transition, because this business is a very cyclical business.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It'll go for years and years and years being thrashing nightclub party things, and then it'll switch to being more hangout pub things, which is what a lot of the places have transitioned into. Right? It's not like they've disappeared; they've just changed.
Right.
So now you've got a healthy mix of nightclubs and a healthy mix of pubs, and everyone kind of seems to have their own crowd and do their own thing, and it's really become less competitive because everyone's figured out what their niche market is.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Here's your market, here's your market, here's your market. And nobody really competes and tries to get a hold of anybody in this market anymore, because everyone knows where their success lies. And really, there's enough of each pie to survive. If you tried to compete with somebody else and split the pie down the middle, you wouldn't succeed. So a lot of it's really come down to people knowing what their market is and going for it and succeeding with it. And I think everybody's doing pretty good.
It's really interesting that you bring it up that way, because I remember at a time through the late 90s, early 2000s, when things were really cutthroat through here. Like, club owners would not work with each other, they wouldn't talk to each other, they wouldn't do anything. Have you noticed a transition that way?
We've always gotten along with everybody, and I think for the most part, everyone gets along with everybody. I think there was a certain point in time where there was really when September 11th happened, and there was a time where the crowd started dissipating and business started getting tougher.
People started panicking?
No, I think what the easiest common denominator for people was to sell cheap drinks. There's some bar owners in the city that aren't in the city anymore that were the first to kind of say, well, let's do $2 drinks all night. Let's do this. And that's what everybody kind of got into doing. And that's what kind of made people sour against one another. But once everybody figured out that that's not going to work, because what happens is once one guy starts selling a cheap drink, everybody else starts selling a cheap drink, then you're all selling cheap drinks. Well, where do you go from there?
Yeah.
So I think once everybody started picking apart the crowds and really getting their feet wet with what was happening and what the future held, I think once that started happening, things started to change. And for the most part, I think everybody gets along. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't get along downtown anymore.
Being one of the more prominent business owners here in the city, politics are always a major part of business. Do you get involved in the ongoings of the city?
I used to. I used to be there all the time. I used to speak at council. I used to be involved in all this political stuff, from BIA stuff to what was happening in Windsor, and really it's something that I wish I had time to do and participate in more, and I'm slowly starting to realize that it's important that we have a voice. But now that we have, a strong BIA, some strong personalities as bar owners, it's not as difficult as it was before. We don't have to be as outspoken as we were before because, there's a lot of we're getting a lot more representation these days, and it's something that we want to continue to do and continue to strive for. I was talking to another borrower this morning at our press conference who, really wants to try and start pushing to bring more Americans down here. So, it's certainly something that's always on my mind. I wish I had more time for it, but, really with my schedule, it's tough for me to participate in more political ends.
Do you spend any time thinking about the overall picture of the Windsor music entertainment scene?
All the time.
What do you think from your perspective? What do you think that we need that we're lacking, or what do you think we need to do better at?
I think we just need more people here. I think that what the city's doing by growing in so many different ways, everybody always talks about how the city's doing great, everything but downtown. But I think that as the city gets stronger, downtown's going to get stronger. And I see all kinds of different things on a weekly basis that give me optimism, from different schools opening, new businesses opening, that there's more choice when you come to Windsor. Like, there's more restaurants opening, there's more bars opening, there's more nightclubs opening. There's a lot of things that are starting to turn in favor for downtown Windsor.
Are you optimistic about the downtown?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Where do you sort of envision it coming over the next 5 years? Or do you spend any time with it?
I say 10 years.
Yeah?
I like to think in 10 years, when there's a new bridge open and Detroit continues to grow and do great as it's been doing, and Windsor continues, like, you just look at the housing market in Windsor, how things are exploding. Like, there's people coming here. People are going to continue to come here. It's going to grow, and as it grows and gets better, downtown's going to grow and get better. No question about it.
Where do you think we're failing right now? What do you think could be done better? Actually, I just asked you that. What do you think we're doing right?
Bringing new people into the city.
Yeah.
I think we're doing right. I think people see that Windsor is growing and that it's an affordable place to get into, especially with the immigrants. You see a ton of new immigrants coming to Windsor, and that is a big deal.
Actually, you know what? That is one thing that I did want to talk to you about. And a lot of it has to do with specifically the types of music that's being played or whatever. But culturally, your club, from my observations as I'm sitting around, culturally, your club is one of the more diverse areas. You definitely draw a more diverse crowd than a lot of the other places downtown. Is that something that you do intentionally, or is it just a natural byproduct of what you're doing?
Intentionally, because of the students. The student population has become like that, so we really key in on that, and then we're able to offer, with the different floors and the different levels here and the different genres of music. Like, we do everything here. We've done rock and roll shows, we've done hip hop shows, we've done EDM shows. We do it all. So being diverse is another key to being able to survive as a nightclub.
All right, you've got major music festival coming up.
Just finished another one. Completed Blues Fest.
Just completed, and congratulations, by the way. Broke all kinds of records, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Leuna, the Patronis, the team, the Blues Fest Windsor team is fantastic, and we're honored and privileged to be part of it. We handle beverage, and we help out with promotions, and just being able to work with that team has been unbelievable. They're great people, and we're really excited because a lot of those people we're bringing on board for our event.
Right.
And they're going to be working with us with this year's coming music festival. So, it's really exciting, and it's really been a great opportunity for us, and we're really thankful to be, associated with the people that we've been able to be associated with.
I promised the folks the Doug Flutie story.
Well, the Doug Flutie story, interesting. You brought it up the last time we talked, and you said, "Well, how did you get these names?" Like, what?
Because that was kind of your first big name that you drew, right?
It's really what put us on the map. One of the things that put us on the map as Windsor was, there was a Super Bowl weekend was in Detroit, and everybody was excited. The entire city was excited.
My favorite part was all the bullshit rumors that were flying around.
Yeah, we did a lot of that.
Yep.
And that was premeditated.
Yep.
But one of the things that was going on was everyone was talking about, well, how was Windsor going to be part of the Super Bowl?
Right.
And from a city perspective, what were we going to do to make our stamp, to put our stamp on Windsor? And at the time we were brand new. We were the new nightclub in town, and we had booked a couple big acts like Freddie Benassi and James Abila, and we were sitting around saying, well, what could we do for the Super Bowl? And I know the city was talking about doing this big party at the Armories that they wanted to do. So we're like, well, how are we going to compete? What are we going to do? Like, if they're going to get some of the NFL people over there, how are we going to stand out? And when we were kids, we used to work with the Toronto Argonauts.
Right.
We would hand out programs at Argo games at Exhibition Stadium. So, we were really, really, and still are, big CFL guys. So, turns out that, Super Bowl's coming to Windsor. What are we going to do? Well, we knew from when we were kids with the Argos that Doug Flutie played in a band.
Right.
And at this time, Doug Flutie's no longer in the Canadian Football League. He's now the backup quarterback for Tom Brady in the National Football League with the New England Patriots, who are still in the playoffs. So out of the blue, I said, why don't we see if, Doug's brother would be interested in taking the band and performing at the club, and, we can see if there's a possibility that Doug would come. And if we can get Doug to come, maybe he'll bring some other guys, and maybe he'll bring some other guys. So we made a couple calls, and we were talking to an agent in Toronto, and it turned out that, the Doug Flutie band was already booked to play Ford Field in Detroit for the Super Bowl that weekend. And if we wanted them, we could have them for the Friday night in Windsor. And if Doug didn't make it to the Super Bowl, he would be able to appear, and that they would bring somebody with them. As the Doug Flutie band always does, they bring somebody big from Boston with them, whether it's Leonard Skinner or Bon Jovi or someone that they're associated with. And as long as they don't make the Super Bowl, you guys can have them. It turns out, I think the Patriots lost to the Steelers.
How bad were you rooting that game?
Really bad.
Yeah.
Really bad. We were really bad. So it turns out that Flutie becomes available and says, "Sure, right. I'll play at your bar, no problem." So we announced it, and the next day, I'll never forget, Ramon. And this is pre-Eventbrite, right. Unless you worked with Ticketmaster, you couldn't. There was no online tickets. Right. This is back in the day.
Get them at the door.
Get them at the door. So I remember Remo and I showing up the next morning after it was on the cover of the paper that Doug Flutie and his brother's band were going to perform and do this fundraiser for autism at the Boom Boom Room. That we walked in the club, and we walk in and we see, we open up the door, and the mail slot's right at the front door, and we look down, and there's a Saskatchewan Roughriders credit card sitting there with a yellow note on it, and it says, 28 tickets, whatever the price is, Canadian Football League Hall of Fame. And I guess what happens is every year at the Super Bowl, the Canadian Football League Hall of Famers go. Right. And there was a guy from the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the Hall of Fame that just left his credit card there and said, charge me whatever you want. And we've done the biggest names. We've done the Tiestos, we've done the Dead Mouses, we've done the Tommy Lees, we've done it all, but never have I seen a crowd that was there for Super Bowl in that year. It was insane. Like, the streets were closed. We got a police escort from El Gabbiano where we went for dinner. It was nuts. And when we showed up to the front of the club, as far as the eyes could see, you had television cameras everywhere just filming this, quarterback that was coming to play guitar. And I'll never forget, everyone thought, who's coming? Is it going to be Bon Jovi? Is it going to? We were said Hulk Hogan was going to come. We started dropping all these names.
There was a rumor that was floating around that Bon Jovi was supposed to show up, right?
It's funny because my DJ, Curious George, is probably one of the best DJs ever from Windsor.
Right.
Decides that he's going to, there's throngs of people standing outside the club waiting to get in, he decides that he's just after a sound check that he's going to play a little bit of Bon Jovi. And when he did that, of course everyone outside thinks that Bon Jovi's doing his sound check, and people just start throwing money in the air, and it was chaos. People thought, oh my God, he's here, Bon Jovi's here too, and it was madness, and it was madness for Windsor, and everybody was busy. I'll never forget, Cheetos was open at 10 a.m. There was a lineup of guys standing outside. Right. I think Fox News was filming their live sports show from in there. It was just, it was a time that just, I knock on wood, we get to see that again. Yeah. Because Windsor never benefited more any other weekend that I was alive than being here for Super Bowl.
Right. It's really incredible to me to see, because you and I have only recently sort of met face to face, but I've sort of been in the background of all of these little things that have popped up and just kind of watch as it's go. It's really, really a pleasure to be able to sit down and sort of discuss all this with you. I'm really looking forward to seeing what else you and your brother have in store for the city.
We're really pumped up for Coming Home Music Festival this year, to have two co-headliners, Loud Luxury, which has got one of the biggest songs in the world right now with Body, and then Fetty Wap, who, as we just had our press conference, I'm doing a little bit of research, and I see that his first 4 songs, he was the first artist since the Beatles to have 4 songs in the top 10 Billboard at his debut, and the Beatles had 3. And I'm
Right.
looking at this, I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy's massive.
It's-
So it's pretty exciting.
It's going to be a good one, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, dude.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to go down and click on the subscribe button to make sure that you can continue seeing our episodes as we put them out. We do a lot of videos, and there's a couple of them here that we hope you'll enjoy. There's one up there that we think you might like, and of course, there's one of our playlists down there for you. Make sure you say hello to some of our sponsors in the links down below while you're there, and of course, you can find links there to today's guest and all of our other social media. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.